positive responses to this series keep on pouring in from a variety of sources, and we pledge to get the information in this series distributed widely once the series ends. People need to know the truth related to the land of Israel and its long-term connection and interwovenness with the Jewish people. There is this discernible desire to know what the facts are and not the distortions and lies being presented as facts by the world media like Reuters, BBC, CNBC, NPR, and many others. It's hard to know what the truth is when we listen to such hate-filled newspapers as the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Boston Globe, and Washington Post. With this series, we are presenting the true facts, not the distortions and lies in the media. For instance, that there was a full-fledged Jewish state in Israel for almost 1,400 years until the Roman destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE and the conquering of Beitar in 135 CE. And that Muhammad was not even born for an additional 450 years. And Islamic armies never even approached Israel for another 550 years. We have discussed the true origins of the word Palestine and the modern connection of so-called Palestinians. We have discussed the lack of historic Islamic interest in the land of Israel or in Jerusalem, and the passionate Jewish connection with Israel. And we have discussed the effect of all these lies on historic and current development of anti-Semitism in America and throughout the world. A few historical words about the origins of the use of the word Israel and its relationship to the Jewish people. The name Israel first appears in Egyptian writings in about the 12th century BCE, right around the time that Joshua entered the land and crossed the Jordan and began the distribution of land in the territory which began to be referred to as Israel. It was presented by the Egyptians at the time as an ethnic grouping that could eventually challenge their hegemony in the Middle East. But it was clearly not seen at that point as an organized state. That's important to recognize. It was not seen until Joshua crossed the Jordan and the Jews settled in Israel and distributed the land. Even the Egyptians did not consider any settlements in this land as part of a state. It was just settlements randomly distributed. In the next century, after Joshua distributed the territories and a Jewish state was actually formed, Egyptian writing all of a sudden begins to identify the area as Israelite, differentiating itself from the Canaanites. Egyptian writings describe a whole new culture emerging, mostly different from the Canaanites and Philistines, and for the first time describes Israel as a distinct nation composed mainly of Hebrews. The Jewish state of Israel was born and would remain generally controlled by the Jewish people for the next 1,400 years. And now, Yitz, you have some thoughts about this.
Yes, thank you, Bob. First, I want to thank you for inviting me tonight. I'm a big fan. My wife and I listen every week, and we learn a tremendous amount. and I actually come with feelings of hope tonight. As you mentioned in the beginning, the main goal is to spread the truth. And sometimes, as a Jewish person, especially in today's climate, a lot of people feel attacked, and they feel like frustrated that the truth has not come out, and even if it does, who's going to believe the truth? It happens to be today I brought a group of 12th grade students to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and we went to an exhibit there called The Courage to Act, and the entire exhibit was about a non-Jewish nation, Denmark. Despite everything that was going on and all the lies and the anti-Semitism that was being spread in Europe, they stood up for the truth. They knew that whatever the Nazis and Hitler was spreading was untrue about the Jews, despite all the propaganda, and they did the right thing. And one of the numbers I was very impressed with was 98% of the Jews in Denmark actually survived because of the courage of the Denmark people. So if the people of Denmark could stand up for the truth, I believe that the rest of the world, in this circumstance with the state of Israel, could also stand up for the truth. And usually this is Shelley's slot, and he does an amazing job every week. And one of the methods that he mentioned that the anti-Semites use is their propaganda and their lies that they spread about the Jews. And I believe that there are two primary purposes to this propaganda. Number one is that it encourages and rallies the troops to perform heinous anti-Semitic acts. And it could be people who wouldn't normally act that way, but it empowers them and emboldens them that they're doing the right thing, and so that's purpose number one. And I think the second purpose is they want to affect what we call the silent majority. The silent majority of people who either aren't aware or their energies are involved in other things, and they want to dehumanize the Jew. And they want that while they're acting in their aggressive, heinous way, they don't want anybody giving them a problem. So at the same time that they're trying to encourage their group to act in terrible anti-Semitic actions, they're also trying to take care of what everybody else thinks so that they don't have a problem in doing the terrible things that they want to do. And they do that through their pictures and words. And these pictures and words send very powerful messages. All you have to do is watch the news or watch the political cartoons, and you see they have Israeli soldiers literally with blood on their hands if you look very closely, or they depict Netanyahu or other Jewish people involved with the same thing I saw in the Museum of Jewish Heritage today. The big rounded head with the big nose and looking for the money. And what this does is it really tries to portray the Jewish people as almost not being human and not relating to human decency and human dignity. And if we look at the words specifically that are used today, we have words like colonizers, genocide, indiscriminate killing, apartheid state, all of these accusations towards the IDF, ethnic cleansing, as Ari just said, all these accusations that are basically saying that Jewish people do not care about other people in the world. And I decided that what I wanted to do with this section was, let's investigate. Is it true that the IDF and the State of Israel actually does not care about the other human beings in the world? Are they indeed racist against our people? So if you research it carefully, not with words and pictures, but with facts, you will see that the IDF, specifically the IDF, their humanitarian global efforts started in the year 1953 when there was an earthquake in Greece. Since then, for the past 70 years, the State of Israel, in particular the IDF, has been at the forefront of providing humanitarian aid under all circumstances to all peoples around the world. Some examples include devastating earthquakes and other natural disasters like tsunamis, typhoons, hurricanes, wars between countries, civil wars within a country, terrorist attacks, bombings. The IDF responds regardless of race, nationality, country, continent, past history with that particular country, with the Jewish people. The IDF has provided aid and assistance to the following countries: Greece, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Macedonia, Kosovo, Cambodia, Armenia, India, Japan, Philippines, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Afghanistan, Mexico City, Haiti, Honduras, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, Congo, Kenya, Ghana, Guinea, and Rwanda, the United States twice, once during Hurricane Katrina and another recently when the buildings collapsed in Florida, Turkey twice when they had earthquakes, Egypt, and Syria. And most recently, they were, if not the first country on the ground in Ukraine, they were one of the first countries on the ground in Ukraine. They respond to every disaster going on around the world, in every country, and even in countries that hate Israel. Even in countries that hate Israel. So let's talk about what the IDF has actually provided, what their form of humanitarian aid has been. They have been involved in search and rescue missions. They have sent thousands of soldiers to provide this form of assistance, and they have shared their advances in technology in assisting other countries in their search and rescue of their citizens, and they've obviously saved thousands of people around the world. The IDF has created sophisticated field hospitals to provide high-level medical care in the worst of environments, war, natural disasters. IDF medical staff have performed hundreds of life-saving surgeries for human beings around the world, at times in the middle of war zones that are not their own. The IDF has transported hundreds of thousands of refugees to safe havens. They have literally changed the trajectory of full families, not only Israelis, and not only Jewish families, families from people around the world. They have provided mental health counseling and created clinics in Africa, in Asia. They have created programs for the protection of women, and they help build infrastructure in third world countries so that those countries can thrive. I wanted to talk about one particular program that the IDF had. It was called Operation Good Neighbor back in 2016. This program, what happened was that the Golan Heights, which is up near Syria, that Israel controls, a Syrian man came to the soldiers there, clearly injured, and the soldiers wanted to help him, so they gave him medical care and they nursed him back to health. Obviously, this person went back to his friends in Syria, and more Arabs and Syrian Arabs came to this base in the Golan Heights. It turned out, within 2 years, over 4,000 Syrian people were treated by the IDF medical facility there. Over 1,400 children in Israeli hospitals and field hospitals. In addition to that, they provided 22 generators, 40 vehicles, over 280,000 gallons of fuel, 646 temporary housing units, 50,000 boxes of baby formula, and many other things for the people in Syria, all because there were people in need and they cared. Now, you might say, maybe the IDF only provides humanitarian aid for people outside of Israel, but they don't take care of the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. Nothing could be further from the truth. Rambam Hospital up in northern Israel in Haifa, and I know Bob happens to have a niece who's a nephrologist there. They provide medical services and medical training to Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank, and they've done it for the past 30 years, where Israeli, Jewish, and Arab healthcare professionals work together and are trained together. And there's actually another program that Israel started in 2017 that's called Bring the Patient, Bring the Surgeon. They realized that doctors in Gaza and the West Bank didn't have the same training that they did. So when one of the patients in Gaza or in the West Bank needed to be treated at Rambam Hospital, they had that patient's physician, the PCP, and their surgeon from the Gazan hospital come to the Rambam facility and observe the surgery that the Israeli surgeons were doing so they could learn how to give that medical care and go back to their people. Colonizers and apartheid states don't do things to empower those people that they're trying to take advantage of. And there are many more examples. But clearly, Israel actually empowers the Palestinians in Israel, and they do things to significantly improve their lives. And I just wanted to end my segment with a quote from one of the leaders in the IDF that I saw in an article in 2015. They created a program that the Israeli medics would respond specifically to Palestinians who were injured, and they included interpreters and different ways of responding so the Palestinian people would feel comfortable. And one of the heads of that program, Captain Dr. Lev, he said the following, and I think this captures the humanitarian efforts and sensitivity of the state of Israel. He said, when people are wounded, attention is not placed on whether or not that person is Israeli, but on people's common humanity. This medical care stems from our commitment to the Jewish and modern value of human rights. So I want to say out loud that we are very proud of the constant kindness that the state of Israel shows to human beings, both in its country and around the world. And I would define the state of Israel as a country of kindness, not the way that it's being portrayed in the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Yitzi. And it's great having you on the show. It was incredible. A lot I didn't know, so I learned a lot. And hopefully we'll learn a lot in this segment. So in previous episodes, we discussed the history of the Jews in the land of Israel. And just last week, we had an overview of Jewish migration over the last 2,000 years. So we've seen how we went from Israel to all over the world. And essentially, it's how our origins as a people are in Israel, not Europe or anywhere else. So tonight, we're going to talk about Palestine, and I'm putting Palestine in quotation marks. The term Palestine, where does it come from? And, by extension, the Palestinians. And just a disclaimer, this is not about being anti-Palestinian. This is not about getting into identity politics. Okay, there exists, I'm not going to deny, there exists a Palestinian identity, and there are people who wave the Palestinian flag and want a Palestinian state. That is their right. We're not here to try to take that away from them. But let's understand the history and the origins of Palestinian identity, how it's evolved over time. So let's discuss facts and history. So last week, we mentioned a Jewish general named Bar Kokhba tried to reestablish Jewish authority over the land of Israel by revolting against the Romans in 132 CE. He failed. Jewish authority would not be reestablished until 1948. And it's important to note the following. At this point in history, the Romans were the foreign colonizers, the invaders. The Jews were the indigenous inhabitants of the land at that time. So as a consequence of the failed revolt against the Roman colonizers, the Roman Emperor Hadrian renamed the area known before as Judea. He renamed it Palestine. What is Judea? What does that mean? That is the Greek version, the Hellenized version of the Hebrew word Judah. What is Judah? It's one of the 12 tribes. If you know your scripture, tribe of Jewish royalty, the tribe of King David. Likewise, Palestine is the Hellenized version of Philistine. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. But again, just to reiterate, referring to the land as Palestine was started by the Roman Empire, a colonizer. So who were the Philistines? They were the enemy of the Jews after they settled in the land of Israel. So in Scripture, if you know it, Samson and Delilah, Samson was a Jew, Delilah was a Philistine. David versus Goliath. David was a Jew, Goliath was a Philistine. David defeated the Philistines. So what was Hadrian doing when he renamed Judea Palestine? He was adding insult to injury. He was putting the final nail in the coffin. He had already physically expelled the Jews from Jerusalem, and renaming was an almost spiritual expulsion. He was meant to completely sever the ties between the Jews and the land in name. He was stripping the Jewish people of their identity by renaming the Jewish homeland after their mortal enemy. So now that we know a little bit about the term Palestine, how about the definition of Palestinians? We're going to see that what it means to be a Palestinian has changed over time. Before Israel declared its independence in 1948, the British are in control, Palestinian referred to anyone who lived in Palestine. It's like you're a New Yorker because you live in New York. It's not an ethnic or religious distinction. In fact, there were Jewish Palestinians. So, for example, the Palestine Regiment was a Jewish infantry brigade group of the British Army during World War I. The Jerusalem Post was actually known as the Palestine Post in 1932 when it was founded by Jews who were Palestinians back then. So if you were a citizen of Palestine, you had a Palestinian ID. But how did Arabs, how did Arabs define Palestine and Palestinians? So, better than me talking, I think a quote is worth 1,000 commentaries. So here we go. Back in 1936, the Peel Commission, which was appointed by the British government to understand the Arab-Jewish conflict, the Syrian leader, Auni Bey Abdelhadi, testified at this commission, and just so you know who he was one of the chief spokesmen of the Palestinian Arab nationalist movement and was a member of the Palestinian Arab delegation to the UK, presumably pro-Palestinian. He said, quote, "There is no such country as Palestine. Palestine is a term the Zionists invented. There is no Palestine in the Bible. Our country was for centuries part of Syria. Palestine is alien to us." Now, clearly he didn't know the history we just talked about because we did not invent the term. But anyway, Arab historian Philip Hiddy said the following, and just so you know, this is from his Wikipedia page. He was a Lebanese-American professor and scholar at Princeton and Harvard University and authority on Arab and Middle Eastern history, Islam, and Semitic languages. He almost single-handedly created the discipline of Arabic studies in the United States. He said, quote, "There is no such thing as Palestine. Absolutely not," end quote. The Saudi envoy to the UN in 1956 said, quote, "It is common knowledge that Palestine is nothing but southern Syria," end quote. Hafez al-Assad, former president of Syria and father of current president Bashar al-Assad, said the following to Yasser Arafat of the PLO, the former chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, quote, "You do not represent Palestine as much as we do. Do not forget one thing. There is no Palestinian people, no Palestinian entity. There is only Syria. You are an integral part of the Syrian people, and Palestine is an integral part of Syria. Therefore, it is we, the Syrian authorities, who are the real representatives of the Palestinian people," end quote. Walid Shubat, a Palestinian-American author and speaker who was born in the West Bank, asked how was it that, and he says, quote, "On June 4th, 1967, I was a Jordanian, and overnight I became a Palestinian. We considered ourselves Jordanian until the Jews returned to Jerusalem," end quote. Essentially, it was only after the Six-Day War in 1967 that Jordanians living in the West Bank considered themselves Palestinian. So I'm going to answer his rhetorical question with another quote from Zahir Hussein, PLO military commander, who said in an interview, and this is the most important, I left it for last, quote, "Just for political reasons, we carefully underwrite our Palestinian identity because it is of national interest for the Arabs to advocate the existence of Palestinians to balance Zionism. Yes, the existence of a separate Palestinian identity exists only for tactical reasons. The establishment of a Palestinian state is a new tool to continue the fight against Israel and for Arab unity," end quote. So what is Palestine in that context? It's a PR tactic. It's a war of words. Further meant, again, taking a page out of Hadrian's book, to further separate the Jewish people from the land of Israel and make them foreigners. The Palestinian National Council of the PLO in 1968 defined Palestinians as, quote, those Arab nationals who until 1947 normally resided in Palestine regardless of whether they were evicted from it or stayed there. Anyone born after that date of a Palestinian father, whether in Palestine or outside it, is also a Palestinian, end quote. So it mentioned Arab nationals. Well, Arab nationals can be Jews. So you know what it says in Article 6 of that charter? The PLO's charter of 1968 says, the Jews who had normally resided in Palestine until the beginning of the Zionist invasion are considered Palestinians. So in 1968, the PLO considered Jews Palestinians. So we see the use of the ancient term Palestine was adopted to artificially give a group of people who themselves are not ancient an ancient history and an ancient identity. And we can also see that there is not a clear definition or acceptance of Palestine or what makes a Palestinian even within the Arab world. And yet, we see people chanting, Palestine will be free, as though there was always a country called Palestine, inhabited by an ethnic group called Palestinians. It's simply, in its context now, as it's used, a modern invention. And it's ironic, right, that Jews are being called colonizers by people whose identity as Palestinians is based on the name Palestine that was first coined by a colonizer, i.e. the Romans, who expelled the Jews. So, and to add to that irony, the Palestinian national flag is based on the flag of the Arab Revolt, the rebellion of Arabs against the Ottoman Empire during World War I. And you can Google this image. It's a red triangle on the hoist side, and from top to bottom, black, green, white. Well, the Palestinian flag just flipped the colors, so now it's black, white, green. Who designed the flag of the Arab Revolt? Which prominent Arab or Palestinian figure, you ask? Sir Mark Sykes of England. And last I checked, England was a colonizing country. So an English politician from London and a key negotiator of the Balfour Declaration. So people are waving a flag based on a design by a man from a colonizing country, chanting for the freedom of a country with a name coined by a colonizer, while calling another group of people who lived there before them colonizer. Unbelievable. So with this information, my hope is that we have dispelled this false narrative that the Jews displaced the Palestinians from their country, Palestine. And yes, there are refugees. We'll get into that in a later show. But as we've seen tonight, the term Palestine is from the Roman Empire, a colonizer term. And today's definition of what it means to identify as a Palestinian has evolved to be weaponized against the Jews, against Israel, to strip the Jewish people of their identity and their history. Okay, Bob?
Really important presentation tonight. I hope the audience has gained a lot of information from it. We will continue to present the truth and the facts in the face of efforts to distort the truth and the facts. This series will bring the people of this country and overseas eventually, as we distribute this series all over the world, the facts of what has gone on, is going on, and is about to go on. We hope that you gain that knowledge and that sense of belief that the truth is not what you read in the paper, not what you see on TV, but is what is presented on shows like this and by people who are able to and willing to speak the truth about what really has gone on and is going on currently. And always remember, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel will live forever. Good night.